Have you ever been accused of being ungrateful by the very people you spent your life trying to save? My name is Elena Tran. I'm 26 years old, and until recently, I lived with my parents and my younger brother in a quiet neighborhood just outside Seattle. From the outside, it probably looked like a modest, functional family home, the kind where birthdays are remembered and the porch light is always on. But behind closed doors, it was a place built on silence, obligation, and the quiet expectation that I would always be the one holding everything together. For years, I paid the bills. Not because anyone asked me to, but because they couldn't. My father hadn't worked in almost 5 years. My mother held on to a part-time job at a local bookstore. And Leo, my brother, was still in high school, always walking on eggshells. I covered rent, electricity, internet, insurance, even groceries. I did it without resentment. Or so I thought, until one rainy December evening, a week before Christmas, when my father sat across the dinner table, looked me in the eye, and told me I was no longer welcome in the house. That night changed everything, not because of what they said, but because of what I did next. It had been raining steadily since the early morning, Seattle rain, the kind that doesn't pour but lingers like a quiet warning. I had just finished a long shift at the office where year-end reports were piling up and everyone's nerves were fraying. My coat was damp at the hem, my hair frizzed from the humidity, and in my hands was a grocery bag filled with essentials I had bought on the way home. Eggs, rice, dish soap, and my brother's favorite cereal. As usual, I used my card. No one had asked me to. It had just become expected. When I pushed open the front door, the familiar scent of old carpet and lemon cleaner hit me. Jazz was playing softly in the living room. My mother's attempt to create a sense of calm, I suppose. The lights were dimmed to a warm hue. A half-decorated artificial Christmas tree stood in the corner, drooping slightly from years of reuse. The house had all the appearances of holiday comfort, but none of the substance. It felt like a performance we were all too exhausted to keep faking. I passed my mother, Clara, in the kitchen. She was pulling a tray from the oven, something overcooked and underseasoned. Her expression didn't change when she saw me. No hello, no how was your day? Just the habitual silence we had all learned to interpret. I set the groceries down quietly and went to my room to change into dry clothes. Dinner was ready 15 minutes later. The 4 of us sat at the table. Vincent, my father, had already poured himself a glass of whiskey. His 5th or 6th of the day, judging by the smell in the room. He sat at the head, back straight, shoulders stiff like he thought it made him look powerful. My younger brother. Leo sat across from me, headphones slung around his neck, quietly eating the food he didn't like but wouldn't complain about. I tried to ease the tension by asking him how his exam went. He mumbled something about chemistry. Our mother said nothing. My father didn't even look up. Then came the moment. Out of nowhere, Vincent set his glass down with a hard click against the wood. The sound cut through the quiet like a blade. He looked straight at me, and I knew something was coming. His eyes had that cold stillness he used when he wanted to. Hurt, but make it look logical. Elena, he said slowly, you've overstayed your welcome. You need to move out. For a moment, I thought it was some strange attempt at a joke. But the silence that followed said otherwise. I looked around the table. My mother stared down at her plate. Leo had frozen mid-chew, eyes wide. I tried to keep my voice even. Excuse me? I asked. You heard me, Vincent continued, calm and cruel. This house isn't yours. You're not contributing anything emotionally. All you do is pay bills like that makes you entitled. It's time you found your own place. Emotionally. That word rang in my ears, as if all the nights I worked overtime to keep the lights on didn't matter, as if the Wi-Fi Leo used for school, the groceries Clara cooked, the gas that kept them warm, none of it counted. I had given them stability, comfort, and the space to pretend things were fine. But that night, it was as if all of it had been invisible. My mother said nothing, no protest, no confusion, just a quiet sip from her glass. Maybe she agreed. Maybe she was tired of pretending too. Leo looked like he wanted to say something. His mouth opened, then closed. He was only 16, still technically a child, but far too used to adult silences. I gave him the tiniest shake of my head. "Don't get involved," I silently told him. "Not now. Not like this." I pushed my chair back slowly, my heart hammering but my face composed. "All right," I said. Just that. I didn't ask why. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. Because in that moment, something inside me stopped needing their validation. I looked around the table one last time. None of them met my eyes. I returned to my room and sat on the edge of the bed, shoes still on. I wasn't angry in the way people expect. I was clear in a way I hadn't been in years. If they thought they were dismissing me like a child, overstaying a visit, they had no idea what I was truly capable of. They thought I would leave quietly and disappear. But what they didn't know, what they had never even cared to notice, was that I wasn't just the girl living in the back room. I was the one holding the foundation of this house together, and if they wanted me gone, I'd go. But I wouldn't leave it standing behind me. I didn't sleep much that night. After dinner, I closed my door softly behind me and sat still in the dark, letting the rain patter against the window like a quiet metronome. My suitcase was already tucked beneath the bed, a habit from the years I traveled for work and never quite stopped feeling like a visitor, even in my own home. I pulled it out without a sound. The zipper caught slightly as I opened it, the teeth, resisting at first, like even the suitcase wasn't ready to be used again. There was no ceremony to the packing, just movement, quiet, efficient. I folded clothes mechanically, grouping my essentials, work outfits, hoodies, a few framed photos. I kept on my desk. I grabbed my external hard drive and notebooks from the top drawer, my laptop charger, my birth certificate, passport, and financial documents I had kept in a zippered pouch. It felt more like a departure from a hotel than leaving a childhood home. Maybe that was the clearest sign I had never truly belonged there. Down the hall, the television buzzed with low voices and canned laughter. My parents had returned to their usual routine like nothing had happened. I imagined them sitting on the couch, eyes glassy, avoiding the real silence between them by turning up the volume of a show neither of them cared about. Leo hadn't come to knock on my door. He knew better than to draw attention when the air in the house turned this kind of sharp. As I placed my shoes in the side pocket of the suitcase, I paused and looked around my room. There were faint marks on the walls where I had once taped up calendars and pinned notes to myself. The bookshelf was mostly empty now, except for a few worn novels I had outgrown. This space had been a container, not a sanctuary. A place where I survived, not one where I thrived. I wrote a short note to Leo on a sticky pad. "Don't panic. I'm not abandoning you. I just need to protect myself first. Keep your head down. I'll stay in touch." I tucked it under the corner of his door, careful not to let it slide too far. Then I tiptoed back to my room and double-checked everything. By 2 a.m., I was ready. I hadn't said goodbye, not because I was trying to be cold, but because there was no one left to say goodbye to. Anyone who could throw me out without a conversation wasn't entitled to a farewell. I didn't owe them that anymore. I had spent years translating their coldness into misunderstanding, their silence into stress. But now I saw it for what it was: willful neglect. Before I zipped the suitcase shut, I took one last look at my bank apps on my phone. My name, my accounts, my automatic payments, lined up like loyal soldiers in a war I never signed up for. The mortgage debit, the utility, autopay, even the Wi-Fi I had upgraded so Leo wouldn't fall behind in online classes. I had held up every beam in this house from the shadows, And now, I would begin to let go. I slid my suitcase to the door and took a deep breath, long and full. I wasn't just leaving a house. I was leaving behind a version of myself I had kept, alive for them, a version that always made excuses, always filled in the gaps, always stayed. But that Elena no longer fit into this space. As I reached for the door handle, my phone lit up. A message from Leo. "Are you really going?" I paused, fingers hovering above the screen. I wrote back, "Yes, but I'm not leaving you. Just wait. Watch." Then I opened the door and stepped into the hallway. The lights were off. No one stirred. I passed the living room where my father lay slumped on the couch, a half-empty glass, on the floor, snoring softly. My mother wasn't visible, probably already asleep in their room. They had made their decision, and I was making mine. When I stepped outside, the rain was lighter, misty. The cold bit at my collar, but I didn't pull my coat tighter. I wanted to feel it. All of it. The ache, the clarity, the sudden weightlessness. I placed my suitcase in the back seat of my car, got in, and started the engine. I didn't look back at the house, not even once, because I knew when the sun rose the next day, everything would start to change. Quietly, precisely, and on my terms. The next morning, I parked outside a modest apartment complex in Bellevue, where my friend Sabrina lived. She had once offered me her spare room when I was burned out after a rough project at work. I hadn't accepted then. I was still trying to hold my family together. But now when I called her at 6 a.m., barely whispering, "Can I come over for a few days?" she didn't ask a single question. She just said, "I'll put the kettle on." That's who Sabrina was, sharp, intuitive, and fiercely protective of the people she cared about. By 6:30, I was sitting on her couch with a blanket wrapped around me and a mug of tea in my hands. Her apartment smelled like cinnamon and fresh linen. It was quiet in a way that didn't feel oppressive. I hadn't breathed that deeply in months. After I had showered and unpacked, I sat down at her kitchen table, opened my laptop, and stared at the screen for a long time. I wasn't just tired. I was unraveling. But even through the fog of exhaustion, one thought repeated itself in my head. They don't get to call me ungrateful, not after everything I've done. So I began retracing every thread I had woven into that household over the past 4 years. I logged into my banking dashboard and started reviewing recurring payments. The electric bill had my name on it, set up 2 winters ago when the power company threatened to cut them off. The Wi-Fi account, too, registered under my email, since Leo needed reliable service for his classes. The water bill, gas, the insurance on the family car, a credit card I had opened in my name, only to give my mother access for groceries when her debit account was overdrawn. Every time I thought I was just helping out temporarily, it had turned into a silent obligation. I opened my financial planning spreadsheet. Yes, I had one. Years of budgets, charts, and folders labeled family emergency, Leo's tuition, Dad's medical, all sitting in rows like quiet proof that I had kept that household from collapsing. While Vincent brooded in the living room, and Clara clipped coupons like it was still 1998, I was the one quietly transferring $200 here, $400 there, making sure the heater worked, the internet stayed on, and the mortgage was never more than 15 days late. But the deeper I dug, the more I remembered something else. Something they had all seemed to forget. When my grandfather died 2 years ago, he had left behind a small inheritance. Nothing extravagant, but enough to split among the family. The only reason any of that money had reached my parents was because I handled the paperwork. I had acted as executor of the will, signed every document, managed the taxes. In fact, when we refinanced the mortgage last spring, I had to co-sign, because neither of them had the credit to qualify. At the time, it seemed like the responsible thing to do. I thought, better me than lose the house. But that act of responsibility came with legal implications. I went back to the property records. There it was, buried in fine print but crystal clear. My name listed as a co-owner on the deed. Not honorary. Legal. Binding. And they had just kicked me out of a house I partially owned. I sat back in the chair, a strange kind of calm settling over me. Not anger, not satisfaction, just clarity. They had wanted to humiliate me, push me out and reclaim control. But in doing so, they had forgotten the foundation they were standing on. Me. They thought I was powerless because I didn't argue. But silence is not weakness. And now I wasn't going to explain myself anymore. I was going to act. I started organizing everything. Documents, screenshots, bank records, email confirmations. Every receipt, every payment, every automatic draft. I had shouldered for their sake. I was building a wall of facts, not for revenge, for protection, because I knew Vincent wouldn't stop here. He never did. Control was his only language, and I had just become unpredictable. As I stared at the screen, I felt Sabrina's hand rest on my shoulder. "You okay?" she asked gently. I nodded, exhaling. I finally am. But what I didn't say out loud was this. They had kicked me out thinking I would disappear. What they didn't expect was that I had all the keys, financial, legal, and emotional. And now, I was about to change everything, quietly, deliberately, and on record. That afternoon, with the rain still falling in quiet sheets outside Sabrina's windows, I initiated what I silently called the unbinding. It wasn't dramatic. No confrontations. No text messages sent. No calls made. Just methodical steps, one after the other, each one severing a tether they had never truly appreciated. I opened each service account tied to the house, electric, gas, water, internet, streaming, the security system, and removed my banking information. I wasn't canceling anything. I was simply stepping back, letting responsibility fall exactly where they said it belonged. On them. It took less than an hour to undo 4 years of financial scaffolding. When I finished, I opened the shared credit card account, the one my mother used to buy groceries, clothes, and sometimes medication, and removed her as an authorized user. I paused before hitting confirm, not because I doubted the choice, but because it was surreal. I had allowed this card to exist in her name because I believed we were a team. That belief was gone. I clicked. Done. Then I made a quiet decision. Most people wouldn't expect. I wrote a letter. Not to them, but to myself. A declaration, really. I called it, What I Will No Longer Be. I wrote it in bullet points, each one a small liberation. I will no longer be the silent ATM machine disguised as a daughter. I will no longer pay for people who treat me as disposable. I will no longer keep secrets to preserve a version of family that never truly existed. I will no longer give explanations to those who didn't listen when I was begging silently. Writing that letter was more powerful than I expected. It wasn't for catharsis. It was a contract, a binding agreement with myself to act, not react, from this point forward. 2 days passed. The first signs arrived quietly. A string of missed calls from Clara. Then a short, clipped voicemail. "Elena, I think something's wrong with the internet. It's not working." I didn't respond. That same evening, Leo texted me. "Mom and Dad are freaking out. Wi-Fi's down. Thermostat won't connect. Dad said something about calling the service guy, but then just yelled at Mom." I told Leo simply, "I'm fine. Stay calm. I'll check in soon." But in the background, the unraveling had begun. The next morning, Clara left another message, this time more anxious. "The water bill shows past due. Elena, did you forget to—" She didn't finish the sentence before hanging up. What she didn't know was that I had screenshot every payment, every service transition, and scheduled the final invoice to go directly to their email. I wasn't sabotaging anything. I was returning ownership, something they claimed to want, but I knew this house wasn't built on ownership. It was built on quiet dependency. And I had removed the beam. Then came the moment I had quietly anticipated. I received an email from the mortgage service. A password reset request had been made on the account. I froze. Then I logged in. No changes had been made yet, but the notification included the device location, my old address. I didn't need to guess. Vincent had realized what I already knew. I was still legally on the mortgage, and if I wanted, I could complicate everything for him, not out of spite but simply through presence. They had kicked me out without realizing I was the only person binding the financial structure together. I immediately changed my login credentials, added two-factor authentication, and then scheduled a consultation with a real estate attorney for the following week. I didn't know yet what I would do, whether I'd force a sale, file a claim of ownership, or simply freeze the mortgage for non-payment and watch the fallout unfold. But I knew one thing for certain. I was no longer interested in protecting them from themselves. That night, Sabrina and I sat on her couch with the heater humming beside us, both of us working on our laptops. She glanced over at me. "You're really doing this." I looked at her. "They told me to leave," I said quietly. "So now, I'm showing them what that actually means." Sabrina smiled faintly, not out of amusement but out of recognition. She had walked her own version of this path once, cutting ties with people who only remembered her when they needed something. She didn't offer advice, just presence. That was all I needed. Later, as I lay in the unfamiliar comfort of a home that wasn't mine but where I felt safe, I stared at the ceiling and thought about power. Not the kind people shout about or swing around like a weapon, but the kind that moves silently, in decisions, in boundaries, in the refusal to be erased. They wanted me to disappear. But I wasn't disappearing. I was only just beginning to exist. 3. Days later, the unraveling turned into chaos. It began with a voicemail from Leo, left just after school. His voice was low, uneasy. "Dad's losing it," he whispered. "The house is freezing. He tried to restart the heater himself and nearly broke the fuse box. He's yelling about how everything's broken and how this is all your fault." I could hear pots clanging in the background and my mother saying something sharp. Leo sounded shaken. I didn't respond right away. I let the message sit for a moment. Then I called him back. "Are you safe?" I asked. He hesitated. "Physically? Yeah, but it's tense." He slammed a drawer so hard earlier it cracked. "He's been trying to log into your bank account. I saw him holding Mom's old password notebook." My grip tightened on the phone. I had already changed all my passwords. Every account now had two-factor authentication, linked to a secure email and number he didn't know existed. But the fact that he was trying, that he felt entitled to access what I had built for myself, was no longer just desperation. It was escalation. "Thanks for telling me," I said. "Don't confront him. Just stay out of it. And Leo, if he ever scares you, leave and call me. No hesitation." He was quiet for a beat. "I wish I could leave now." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "You will. Just hold on a little longer." That night I received another alert. Suspicious login attempt. Blocked. Again, the location was my old address. This time, I reported it. I didn't care if it made things uncomfortable. I was done pretending I was overreacting. Vincent was trying to take something from me, and now I had the documentation to prove it. The next morning, I drove downtown to meet with the real estate attorney. Her name was Marla Nguyen, mid-40s, clear-eyed, and efficient. After I showed her the mortgage documents and explained my role as co-signer and partial owner, she looked over her glasses at me and asked, "And you say they kicked you out?" I nodded. She leaned back in her chair. Then you're still entitled to everything your signature legally supports. If they're living there without your consent and attempting to exploit your information, you're well within your rights to act, especially if there's evidence of attempted fraud. I opened my laptop and showed her the login attempt reports, the screenshots of the password reset emails, and even the photos of documents they had left out last year. Forms Vincent had started filling without telling me, hoping I'd sign them blind. She reviewed it all carefully. We can send a cease and desist letter, demand repayment, even request a court-supervised evaluation of the property. My heart pounded, not out of fear, but out of something else. Something like reclamation. Do it, I said. I don't want revenge. I just want out. Officially. That same afternoon, Marla drafted a legal letter stating that I no longer gave consent for the use of my name on any new refinancing, sales, or debts associated with the house. She filed a protective notification with the county office to prevent unauthorized activity on the mortgage. And then, we sent a hard copy to the house. The silence didn't last long. That evening, my phone rang again. It was Clara. I didn't answer. Then came the message. Elena, we got a letter. From a lawyer. What are you doing? You want to destroy your own family? Over what? Pride? Ego? Her voice wasn't calm anymore. It was panicked. She was starting to realize that the daughter she thought would always stay quiet had, in fact, chosen not to stay at all. But what shook me wasn't the message. It was the next voicemail, from Vincent. His voice was cold, clipped, and filled with venom. You think you're clever? You think you can use the law against me? That house is mine. I built it. I raised you. And now you're trying to take it from me? You'll regret this. Mark my words, Elena. You're not as strong as you think. He hung up. But I stayed seated for a long time, phone resting in my hand. I wasn't afraid. Not anymore. What I felt was something different. A certainty that I had crossed a line. There was no returning from. A line they had drawn the night they told me to leave. I had simply stepped over it. That week, Leo messaged me again. Dad's mood is getting worse. He's blaming everyone. He even yelled at Mom in the driveway. Neighbors heard. She cried. Then he stormed inside. I stared at the message. I wanted to comfort Leo, to drive over, pull him out of that house. But I knew it wasn't time yet. Not legally, not logistically. I had to be patient. I had to finish what I had started. Because now, it wasn't just about leaving. It was about drawing a line they couldn't cross again. About showing them, through calm, strategic steps, that what they tried to discard was the very thing holding everything together. They told me I was ungrateful. Now they would learn what true gratitude costs, when it's gone. 2 days after the lawyer's letter arrived, I received a text from Leo at 7:42 a.m., just as I was finishing my coffee in Sabrina's kitchen. He's trying to refinance. I overheard him on the phone saying he'll fix the paperwork with Elena's info if he has to. My chest tightened. It wasn't just anger anymore. It was clarity sharpened to a point. Vincent was desperate. And now he was willing to commit fraud to try and claw back control of a life that was slipping through his fingers. I didn't reply to Leo immediately. Instead, I opened my email and forwarded the message to Marla, my attorney. She responded within minutes. Come to the office today. We're filing an injunction. Her tone was crisp, urgent. She had seen this before. People who thought family ties were permission slips to do anything they wanted. That afternoon, we filed a temporary injunction to freeze any changes to the property title and mortgage until the court could review the ownership dispute. It wasn't a full restraining order, but it sent a very public message. I wasn't bluffing, and I wasn't alone. That same day, I checked all my personal accounts again, just in time. There had been another password reset attempt, this time on my primary bank. It had failed, but the security logs showed 3 attempts within 20 minutes. I activated biometric verification across every platform and set alerts on my credit report. Then I filed an official identity theft warning with my bank, linking the location to my parents' home. I wasn't just defending myself anymore. I was building a case. And quietly, I was documenting every step, every voicemail, every threat, every message that hinted at coercion, hacking, or manipulation. I had even installed a new app that recorded all my calls automatically, just in case things escalated further. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not out of fear, but because the weight of what was happening had finally reached a new threshold. The man who once told bedtime stories in a soft voice was now trying to steal my identity. My mother, once the quiet mediator, had become a shadow at his side. Silent, complicit, and unwilling to speak up even now. But there was something else. Something that haunted me even more than the hacking attempts or the legal chaos. Leo. He was still there. Still walking through the same halls I had escaped from. Still sleeping under the same roof as a man unraveling in real time. The next day, I left work early and drove to the school where Leo attended. I didn't go in. I waited across the street, engine idling, watching for him. When he finally stepped out, shoulders hunched under his hoodie, headphones in, I waved him over. He climbed in, eyes wide. "I shouldn't be gone too long," he said quickly. "If Dad notices, you're not going back today," I interrupted calmly. "Not until I know you're okay." He didn't argue. Just stared forward in silence. At Sabrina's apartment, he sat on the edge of the guest bed, nervously tapping his fingers. "He's been saying things," he finally admitted, "about you, that you betrayed the family, that you owe them for raising you. He talks like he's building a case against you." I nodded slowly. "He is. But I'm building one too. And I'm using the truth." Leo looked up, a flicker of something in his eyes. Relief, hope, maybe both. That night, I drafted a formal affidavit outlining everything. My financial contributions, the co-ownership, the login attempts, the threats. Marla added it to the court file. She was also coordinating with a cybersecurity expert Sabrina knew through work to help verify the hacking attempts and their origins. It wasn't just personal anymore. It was technical, provable, real. Then something I hadn't expected. I received a message from my employer's HR department. They'd gotten a strange call from someone asking to verify Elena's employment and salary information. They thought it was a lender or financial institution, but found it odd that the caller refused to identify themselves. I knew who it was. Vincent was trying to pull strings he no longer had access to, trying to find new ways to manipulate the system, to stretch the lie far enough until someone believed him. But all he was doing was tightening the rope around his own credibility. Marla filed a notice to begin a formal investigation into attempted identity fraud. If he kept pushing, she said, we'd have grounds for civil damages. And if we were lucky, or if he got careless, criminal charges. Still, the hardest part wasn't the legal battle. It was the emotional reckoning. How do you mourn a family that's still alive, but no longer yours? How do you protect a younger brother without destroying what little illusion he has left of his parents? That night, Leo looked at me from the hallway of Sabrina's apartment, wrapped in one of her oversized hoodies. "You think this is going to stop him?" he asked. I hesitated before answering. "I don't know," I said honestly. "But I know this. He won't get to rewrite the story. Not this time." Because the truth wasn't just my weapon anymore. It was my shield. And I intended to use it until nothing he said, nothing he tried, could ever touch me again. By the end of the week, everything reached a boiling point. It was Friday evening when it happened. Sabrina and I had just finished dinner, and Leo was on the couch scrolling through his phone, the television playing quietly in the background. I was reviewing documents on my laptop, another legal update from Marla, this time confirming that the court had officially acknowledged my injunction filing and flagged the property for financial disputes. It meant that Vincent couldn't proceed with any refinancing or legal actions tied to the house without notifying me first. A small win, but a solid one. Then came the knock. 3 firm raps at the front door. Not rushed, but deliberate. Sabrina looked up immediately, her instincts sharp from years working in cybersecurity. I stood slowly, heart beginning to pound. Leo muted the television, eyes wide. No one was supposed to know we were here. I walked to the door and looked through, the peephole. It was Vincent. He stood in the hallway, his hair disheveled, his coat soaked through with rain. His face was expressionless, cold, almost blank. He held a manila folder in one hand and tapped it once against his palm. I felt a tremor rise in my chest. I took one step back. "He found you?" Sabrina whispered. I nodded. "Call the police," I said quietly. "Now." She didn't hesitate. Vincent knocked again, louder this time. "Elena," he said, his voice muffled through the door. "I need to talk. Face to face, like adults." I didn't answer. I had already learned what he called adult conversations. They were traps, manipulations dressed in logic and guilt. The last time I let him speak uninterrupted, he kicked me out of my own home. This time there would be witnesses. "I'm not here to fight," he continued louder now. "I just want to explain everything. You misunderstood. The house, it wasn't meant to exclude you. You were never supposed to take it personally." Sabrina gestured to me. "Police are 2 minutes out." Leo stood up behind me. "He's not going to leave," he said quietly. He was right. Vincent began pacing. His words grew more agitated. "You can't do this, Elena. This legal stuff, it's petty. It's childish. We're family. You don't drag family into court. You talk it out. You fix it from the inside." And then, like a switch flipped, his tone shifted. "Unless that's what you want, right? You want to see your father humiliated? You want me to be arrested? To lose everything? Over what? A few utility bills?" I felt a chill creep up my spine, not from fear, but from recognition. That was the real voice. The one he used when he felt control slipping through his hands. The voice of a man who had never truly believed he could be held accountable. Sirens pierced the quiet a few seconds later. Red and blue lights flashed through the thin curtains. Vincent turned toward the sound but didn't move. When the officers arrived, they were calm and professional. One approached the door while the other confronted him directly. "Sir, you've been reported for trespassing and potential harassment. We need you to leave immediately," the officer said. Vincent pointed at the door. "She's my daughter. She's ruining her own family. She's turning her back on everything." "Sir," the officer repeated, "we need you to step away from the door." When he didn't comply, they placed him in temporary detainment. No handcuffs, not yet, but enough to make him understand that the law wasn't just a suggestion. I stepped outside with my ID and calmly explained the situation. The legal filings, the threats, the identity fraud. I gave them the case number. Marla had prepared. The officer nodded and took it seriously. "If you'd like," he said, "we can file a formal restraining order. His actions tonight would qualify." I looked over at Vincent, who sat on the curb now, drenched and defeated, head in his hands. I didn't feel triumph. Just release. "Yes," I said. "I want to file it." Back inside, Leo stood frozen. I walked to him and wrapped him in the kind of hug I hadn't given since he was a kid. He didn't say anything at first. Then he whispered, "It's really over, isn't it?" I nodded. It's beginning to be. That weekend, the court granted the temporary restraining order. Marla filed the motion to officially divide the property and begin a partial sale to remove my financial ties. We had enough documentation now to argue for a forced buyout or public listing. The next week, Leo officially moved into Sabrina's guest room. I bought him a new phone line, set up his student aid appointments, and helped him enroll in an early college admissions program for next spring. He smiled more, laughed more, ate full meals without glancing over his shoulder, and for the first time in years, he slept with his door open. As for me, I moved into a one-bedroom apartment near the lake. It was quiet. Sunlight filtered through, the windows in the morning. There were no sudden outbursts, no slammed doors, no frozen silences. Just peace. I filled the bookshelves with things I had once put into storage. Framed photos of me and Leo at the zoo, a small clay sculpture I made in college, the novel my grandfather gave me before he passed. I planted herbs in the kitchen window, lit a candle every evening. They had told me I was ungrateful, but they never once asked what I had given up. Now, with the court on my side, the law as my boundary, and my brother finally free, I was beginning to understand what freedom really looked like. It wasn't loud. It didn't demand revenge. It simply meant no one could ever take from me what I wasn't willing to give. And that, for the first time, was everything. Weeks passed, and the silence that followed was both strange and necessary. Vincent didn't call again. Clara never reached out. Whether it was fear of the restraining order or shame, I didn't know. And I didn't need to. I had long stopped looking for apologies from people who believed silence could erase harm. Meanwhile, the legal process continued its steady, measured pace. Marla informed me that the court had accepted our motion to force a financial separation on the house. It would either be refinanced without my name or sold outright, with my share protected and transferred. Vincent had 30 days to respond. And every day that passed without action was a day closer to final release. Leo was adapting quickly. At just 16, he had been forced to mature far too early. But in Sabrina's apartment, I saw pieces of boyhood return. He joined the after-school robotics club, started waking up without tension in his shoulders, and even smiled while making jokes, something I hadn't seen in months. We got into a routine, dinner together 3 nights a week, homework check-ins and quiet conversations in the living room where he could finally ask the questions he had been too scared to voice before. "Do you think he'll ever stop blaming us?" he asked one evening, his voice barely louder than the rain against the windows. "I don't think blame is the point anymore," I said after a moment. "He's not angry because we did something wrong. He's angry because we stopped, letting him control the story." Leo nodded slowly, as if that truth had been sitting somewhere in his chest, waiting for a name. I used to think that if I tried harder, got better grades, stayed out of trouble, he'd stop being like that. I looked at him carefully. That's what they made us believe, that if we were perfect enough, maybe they'd become decent people. But that's not how this works. Their choices were never about us. They were about what they refused to heal in themselves. For a long time, neither of us spoke. And then he leaned back, his hands clasped behind his head. "It's weird. This place doesn't feel like home yet, but it doesn't feel like danger either." That was enough. For now, safety was a victory. One evening, I received an envelope addressed in Vincent's handwriting. It had been sent through the court to comply with the restraining order. Inside was a typed letter, impersonal and formal, claiming that I had twisted the facts and that I would regret turning against my own family. Attached was a spreadsheet of expenses from my childhood, school fees, sports uniforms, rent from when I was a teenager, as if to imply that I owed them something for being born. I showed it to Marla. She scanned it and raised an eyebrow. "This isn't a defense," she said. "This is an emotional invoice from a man who can't comprehend that love isn't transactional." We filed it under non-responsive, meaning the court would proceed with the property order as scheduled. He had until the end of the month to appeal or comply. The clock was ticking and I wasn't waiting for closure. I had already built my own. As for Clara, the last thing I heard was that she had started staying with her sister across town. She hadn't shown up at any of the court proceedings. No statements, no messages, just quiet withdrawal. Perhaps it was guilt. Or perhaps she still believed silence was safer than accountability. I no longer cared. Instead, I focused on rebuilding what mattered. I upgraded Leo's laptop, helped him file his financial aid application. I even taught him how to budget, something no one had ever taught me. Each small task felt like undoing a knot I had been carrying for years. And every time he said thank you, I knew he meant it not just for that moment, but for all the ones that had come before. One Sunday morning, we drove out to the lake near my apartment. The sun was low, the water still. We sat on a bench in quiet peace. Leo skipped stones while I sipped coffee. He turned to me, smiling. "When I graduate, I'm going to apply out of state, maybe even go somewhere warm." "You should," I said. "Anywhere you want to go, I'll help get you there." He nodded. "I want to do it on my own, but I'm glad I'm not alone anymore." That line stayed with me long after we drove home, because in the end, that was the heart of it. Not revenge, not punishment, not justice wrapped in court filings. Just this, knowing we were no longer alone, and never would be again. What happened? With Vincent and Clara wasn't just a family breakdown. It was a mirror reflecting something deeper. How control can disguise itself as tradition, how manipulation can wear the face of duty, and how silence is often mistaken for peace. But the truth is, sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is walk away. Not in anger, not in vengeance, but in clarity. As I look back now, with legal separation finalized, Leo safe and planning his future, and my life finally my own, I don't see tragedy. I see rebirth. Leaving didn't mean losing a family. It meant creating a foundation where love was no longer conditional, where safety wasn't a privilege I had to earn, and where boundaries weren't a betrayal, but a form of love, for myself and for the people I choose to protect. If you're watching this and something in this story echoes your own, if you've ever been made to feel guilty for outgrowing someone's control, know this. You're not selfish for choosing yourself. You're wise. What would you have done in Elena's place? Would you have stayed silent or taken legal action? 2. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And if this story moved you or made you reflect on your own journey, consider subscribing. There are more stories coming, ones that remind us that choosing peace sometimes starts with saying goodbye.